It's July 9th, 1984. A pre-NBA Michael Jordan is going up against the man many consider to be the best player in the NBA, reigning NBA MVP Larry Bird. No one knew who or what Michael Jordan would become at the time, but this first matchup between Bird and MJ set the stage for one of the greatest duels of all time, just 2 short years later. But Larry Bird certainly wasn't one to give in on the hype for the NBA's 3rd overall pick. Actually, this was the same guy who just months later had one of his greatest games ever against the Atlanta Hawks en route to another MVP award. He dropped 60 points. This wasn't just some game for Bird. He wanted to go out there and basically tell the entire world, ladies and gentlemen, today I choose war. A moment so all-time special that the dudes Larry Bird was dropping 60 points on were cheering his shots as they watched him mercilessly wipe out their entire team. I think it was safe to say that the NBA wouldn't see a more instinctively cold-blooded trash talker ever again. Wait, I think there's one guy who could challenge him though. Because when it came time for the most important battle between the future face of the NBA wearing number 23 and number 33 from Boston, something so incredible happened, it'll literally blow you away. We all know that Michael Jordan played arguably the greatest rookie season in NBA history. He led the NBA in points, was 4th in steals, had the highest PER for a rookie in league history. But despite the NBA's new hotshot taking over the world by storm, dunking and jumping from impossible angles and revolutionizing the sport seemingly every night, it was still number 33's league. Larry Bird was an assassin, a champion, and later that season he went on to win his 2nd MVP in a row. In fact, Larry Bird was so dominant that he won 2 MVPs, an NBA Finals MVP, started in 2 consecutive All-Star games, finished with the highest PER and the highest value over replacement player in a season, had the highest box plus minus 2 straight seasons, led the NBA in win shares and defensive win shares in a season, and was selected to 2 straight All-NBA first teams. All in the past 2 seasons. From a guy who they say couldn't really jump, had no high-flying acrobatics, no flashy handles, none of it. Just played the game better than anyone else. In a league, by the way, with the likes of Dr. J, Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, and yes, even Michael Jordan. And even though MJ's popularity was rising, and even though Larry Bird took his team to another NBA Finals later that year, the NBA needed to see those two go head-to-head in a game of real magnitude. See, before the start of the 1986 NBA playoffs, Michael Jordan and Larry Bird squared off against each other 7 times, with Bird's Celtics winning 6 of those 7 matchups in mostly dominant fashion. MJ was, MJ, averaging 31 points in those 7 games, including a 41-piece in February of 1985. But here's the thing, in their last matchup before the 1986 NBA playoffs, the Celtics beat up on MJ's 24-win Bulls and kept MJ to one of his worst games of the season, giving Boston that added confidence they needed to be able to contain MJ if they played him in a potential first-round matchup. And lo and behold, the Bulls couldn't finish the season strong and avoid playing Bird's first-seeded 67-win Celtics in the first round. The Bulls were just 30-52. MJ was entering his first ever postseason, really not even knowing what to expect, other than being a massive underdog. But actually, there was only one man in the world that was capable of single-handedly beating that stacked Celtics team of the 1980s, and his name was Michael Jeffrey Jordan. That was MJ before Game 2 of the first round against Bird Celtics. His team was already down a game, losing Game 1 by 19 points, despite MJ's 49-point masterpiece. But if you heard the nonchalance in his voice, that's because that wasn't a man who was worried that his team was down and doubted by many to come even close to winning one game. MJ was even-keeled. Boston couldn't contain him in Game 1, and he knew it. And little did they know that this 23-year-old was about to hit an even higher level. On April 20th, 1986, it was one of the most incredible moments in the history of not just the NBA, but the history of sports. The Celtics had a team of all-stars, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, and Danny Ainge, former league MVP Bill Walton, Dennis Johnson, and of course, Larry Joe Bird, who won that season's MVP and an MVP and Finals MVP in the past 2 years, respectively. And the Bulls had, Michael Jordan. The 23-year-old Michael Jordan went into Boston that night against the team with the best defensive rating and the best net rating in the NBA. And I went ahead and crunched all the numbers. Here's what he did. MJ went 12 for 22 on pull-up jumpers, 8 for 14 on drives to the basket, and 2 of 5 on other shots. He shot 22 of 41 overall from the floor, with only 3 of those shots being uncontested. 38 of his 41 shots were shot with a hand in his face. To think that a player playing in his first ever postseason against a dynasty was doing something like that was, and still is, completely and utterly unheard of. Oh, and he attempted 21 free throws and hit 19 of them, with 2 of the most important attempts coming at the end of regulation when MJ, of course, converted both of them to send the game into OT. Now, the numbers might tell you some of the story, maybe even a lot of the story, but without understanding the true nature of this performance, you can't even begin to understand how amazing this game was. First of all, at the time, there obviously wasn't a lot of floor spacing in the NBA to speak of. I mean, the Dallas Mavericks led the NBA in three-point shooting, and they hit a whopping 1.9 a game. But you want to know what was even more impressive? With no floor spacing and no real threat on the Bulls outside of MJ, the Celtics locked in on one player the entire game.
It's hard to imagine that 6 weeks ago you were sitting on the bench.
Yeah, it is. It's very hard for me to imagine. I'm very happy I'm playing down. I'm very happy that I can contribute to the team.
All right, thank you. Good luck today. You don't have to remind me again that you are playing the Boston Celtics. Air Jordan's getting ready to take off.
Watch how as soon as MJ gets into a set, he has 3 guys surrounding him, trying to guess his next move. And when he turns the corner, goes up for a shot, he has 3 guys surrounding him again, with the other 2 perimeter Boston defenders not even paying attention to their man. And that was just the start of the game, before MJ hit his hottest form, and before the Celtics realized that he was going to go hell-bent on scoring the ball. When MJ caught a rhythm and began piling up points, the defense only grew tougher. But it didn't even matter. Look at this absolute monstrosity of a crowd surrounding MJ in the paint. All 5 Boston defenders are ready to lunge at MJ as soon as he launches into the air, but check out what he does next. The young MJ is somehow able to use a combo of incredible footwork and upper body strength to launch off one foot without a running start and into the chest of Bill Walton, draw contact, and still hit the layup. The amount of fluidity in his game at that age, paired with his IQ and his wicked explosiveness, is still what leaves so many of today's players speechless. That combination of speed, explosiveness, and hang time was something this league had not ever seen, and maybe hasn't seen since. Now, Larry Bird was nothing to sneeze at in the game either. Larry Legend had 36 points in that game. He also had 12 rebounds, 8 assists, and hit 14 of his 27 shot attempts. Of course, Bird being the older, more experienced player, he had a different look on this game. While Bird was never the scorer MJ was, you could argue that his IQ was the best in the NBA at the time. I mean, just look at this play.
Bird, pick and roll, decides to go strong to the hoop.
Bird was probably the best shooter in the NBA at the time, which explains why his man is draped all over him as he comes off the pick, trying to deny an open jumper. But Bird recognizes he doesn't have the room to shoot, so he catches with his back to the basket, signals Robert Parrish to the bucket, and gets the defense to completely collapse by faking a pass. This is what gets him an easy lane to the bucket, again, all thanks to the fear the defense had of his shooting and playmaking ability, especially his passing. Super underrated. Just watch how he's able to feel his teammate breaking open on a cut, even though he's already halfway into his shooting motion. He had big help too, getting 24 points from Danny Ainge, 27 from McHale, 15 from Dennis Johnson, 13 from Robert Parrish, and even 10 points from Bill Walton coming off the bench. MJ didn't have nearly the supporting cast that Bird did, though he still got 24 points from Orlando Woolridge, who strangely played more minutes in the game than even MJ. MJ also had the ball for an incredible 44.5% of the time during the game. And just to put that in perspective, there were only 3 guys in the 1985 season with a usage rate higher than 30%, the highest being Bernard King at 35%. In this ongoing NBA season, there are 13 players with a usage rate over 30%, with Joel Embiid and Luka up over 35%. MJ held the ball for nearly half the game, which was completely unprecedented at the time, by the way. He saw double and triple teams, had 38 of his 41 shots contested, and he still scored 63 points. Even with this famous highlight clip we often see from this game, Bird always had incredible instincts on defense. On this play, he defends MJ so well. Don't forget, this might have been the first time he ever guarded someone with handles like this, let alone someone who was pulling off Space Jam moves during a playoff game like Mike was. I mean, God, how special was MJ? Anyway, as I was saying, Bird stays in front of him, dribble for dribble, and gets a hand into his face, and it doesn't matter. Now, the Bulls ultimately came up short, losing by just 4 points in 2 overtimes to arguably the most stacked NBA roster of all time. If anyone were to walk away from that game with their heads down, it had to have been Boston, because, yeah, they won, all right, but not before allowing the greatest individual performance in NBA playoff history. And Larry Bird saw enough after seeing MJ play just 2 playoff games, saying things like, quote, "He obviously was in a zone. He kept him in the game with big basket after big basket. We couldn't stop him. We had about everyone on the team guarding him. And most famously of them all, I think he's the most awesome player in the NBA. Today in Boston Garden on national TV in the playoffs, he put on one of the greatest shows of all time. I couldn't believe anybody could do that against the Boston Celtics." I don't know if we'll ever hear something like this ever again. Remember, these comments came from a guy that never said good things about anyone, not even his own teammates. And he called this Mike kid, who was just 1 year in the NBA, by the way, basically the greatest athlete in sports. This is the same Larry Bird who won back-to-back regular season MVPs, was an NBA champion and finals MVP, and the same guy who was at the time considered probably the best player in the world. Most guys can't even go beyond 1 or 2 words to give their opponents praise for playing a great game, but here was the best player on the planet calling a dude who was taking college classes 2 years earlier the most awesome player in the world. Wow. This is the same Larry Bird, by the way, that told Reggie Miller, "I'm the best effing shooter in the league." This is the same Larry Bird who walked into the locker room earlier that season just before the start of the 1986 three-point contest and said to all the guys, "Hey, which one of you know what's is going to finish second?" And then proceeded to win the three-point contest for the 3rd year in a row while not even bothering to take off his warm-up jacket. Larry Bird was not to be taken lightly, ever. But that night, MJ proved a point. And while there were a few more seasons before he broke through and started winning championships, there is no denying that MJ earned the respect and admiration from his peers unlike any young player ever has in the history of the game. MJ vs. Bird will always be a classic. All right, that's it for this one. Let us know what you thought down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.